the restoration of the priesthood is just as relevant to you as a woman.
Hi, everybody. This is Rachel with Women in Priesthood. This is a channel that I started 5 years ago after President Russell M. Nelson, the prophet of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, called on all women to study all we can about priesthood power. I started this channel as a kind of hobby side project to really take on the prophet's challenge, to really study the way that God is empowering men and women in this church with priesthood power. And it's taken me on an interesting path. A couple last year, I want to talk about stuff that's going on in the news. This is a little bit of a side note, I guess. I wanted to talk about stuff that's going on in the news. So in the last week, there's this big announcement. Let me find it here. Julie Hanks, who some of you are a little more familiar with. It's been an interesting week. We have Julie Hanks, who's a well-known, I would categorize her as an LDS influencer, LDS feminist, LDS therapist, announced her divorce from her husband, and also her good friend, Valerie Hamaker, where they've done a lot of collaborations together, really advocating for some very controversial things, red flags that I would have said. So Julie Hanks, in the same week, Julie Hanks announced her divorce. Julie Hamaker and her husband were called in for a disciplinary council, which they assumed would have led to some kind of excommunication or repentance process. And they, instead of going through the process, they said that they had a forced resignation of their membership. I don't know what's forced. That just sounds like blaming, but that's what we're going to talk about today. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because it isn't necessarily to, like, I know people will be like, you shouldn't slam dunk on people's misfortune. I kind of agree. The problem is that both of these women, Julie Hanks and Valerie Hamaker, have made a brand out of advocating for some really controversial takes and approaches to living your life in the gospel that I had made a video of last year. I noticed these controversial takes that these women were having. And let's see if we can pull up a better picture here. You can go look at some of my last videos where I just really started noticing these women have such red flags in the things that they're advocating for. And every time someone criticized them, they would say, well, you're just sexist, because no women had really said, look, I'm a faithful member of the church. I'm a lot younger than you, and everything you're advocating for is riddled with red flags. So what's significant about this is that both of these women for the last 15, 20 years have made their family life a branded product, right? So Julie Hanks has sold courses on marriage and family, and her marriage really was the product of a lot of her business. And the same with, I think it's really funny to look at the Hamakers vibe right now, is like, now that they resigned from the church, their whole brand is like, oh, look how unified we are. What I think is super interesting is the way that it's really hard to look at people's advocacy in the moment, and you always wonder, I wonder what that's going to look like over time. And the example I'm going to give here is a really successful show in the 90s called Sex and the City, which really did it really redefined like the way that men and women, the way that women operated in the world. And it redefined women as being independent and sexually free. A lot of those, they did a reboot, and most of the 4 main women in Sex and the City didn't get married, did like 1 or 2 had kids. And what's interesting is Candace Bushnell is the author of that. I promise I have a point. Is the author of that show. And she admitted 20, 30 years, she was always an advocate of, I don't want kids, the kind of child-free life. So in her late 50s, her and her husband got a divorce. And she immediately said, 20 years after this hit show that she wrote, Sex and the City writer Candace Bushnell at 60 admits she regrets choosing a career over having children, as she is now truly alone. Interesting, right? So this is her. And in this article, it highlights how this woman, who was really the poster child in the 90s, creating an entire genre of kind of pro-girl, pro-woman, feministy, sexual revolution films and shows. I watched all of Sex and the City, I will admit. I was late to the game, but looking at it now, I can see the narratives and the marketing was out there that if you're a truly empowered woman, you'll reject traditionalism. What's fascinating, though, is that our culture really doesn't track those, it doesn't track how those ideas express over time. Or we forget to track how those ideas are expressed over time. So the reason that I think it is important to highlight Valerie Hamaker's resignation. She self-resigned from the church as a member of the church. And Julie Hanks's announcement that she's getting a divorce. It is important to highlight this, not because we want to dunk on someone else's misfortune or judge them personally, but because these prominent women have advocated for a very controversial approach to living your life in the gospel, and have sold courses over it. And in the 10, 15 years ago, the pitch that they were giving was, basically eat, drink, and be merry. Like if you've watched my breakdowns on Julie Hanks, my encapsulation of her entire therapy process is like, you can be sexist towards men and everything's going to be fine. Like, men are the problem. That's a very diluted approach. But I think it's really important to look at the way that the OG LDS feminists and the way that they rage against traditionalism, they rage against faithfulness, they rage against, if you read Julie Hanks' early thesis, she basically says that the entire family structure should be reorganized to support the empowerment of the mom, right? So as opposed to the family proclamation, which says we really need to be, our core value needs to be taking care of our kids and the next generation, she advocated for the opposite. So how are those ideas expressed over time is actually important, because these ideas will be recycled by the next generation of LDS feminists who are much younger, and I will highlight those girls at the end of the video. But I want to revisit the OG LDS feminist, who's Kate Kelly, a lot of you know. And one of the reasons she was ultimately excommunicated was because she was advocating for women to choose the ordained priesthood movement. She was excommunicated, but a lot of people don't know what also happened to her. She had 2 kids and she got a divorce, which I think is interesting, that there are these women who are selling you an idea that you can rage against the machine, you can kind of be anti-male, and you can still have everything else. But the reality is it does actually cost something. And what you're seeing with all these women is that they're selling you something, and it's resulting in the loss of their marriage, the loss of their commitment to their religion. So there really is no such thing as a free lunch. Julie Hanks announces after, let's read the announcement here. Last week marked our 36th wedding anniversary. So 36 years. And I know the reason I know what her husband looks like is because she has chosen to market. And for anyone who thinks I'm being mean, I did not make her a public figure. She chose to make herself a public figure. She's definitely a millionaire with all the businesses she's set up, marketing and selling this kind of anti-male, pro-woman type of LDS therapy. And she made her family the face of that marketing campaign. She would always show smiley, happy pictures of her husband and her, which is very exploitative, Because if you're someone who's struggling with your marriage and you're saying, well, this LDS woman took this approach, I'm going to buy her course. I'm going to go to her seminar. I'm going to buy her books and sign up for her therapy. Like, she actually sold products about happy marriage while not disclosing that behind the scenes she and her marriage were struggling. So that's false advertising. Someone else you should look up is a person called Rachel Hollis, who she's a Christian influencer and did the same thing, sold marriage courses and marriage seminars. And then when her husband announced they were getting divorced, she was basically canceled by her own following because they were so frustrated by the lack of honesty. And so she says, last week marked our 36th wedding anniversary, a milestone that we honor with gratitude, reflection, and heartfelt transition. After much thoughtful consideration and open conversation, Jeff and I have made the mutual decision to separate and divorce. We are lovingly shifting our relationship from marriage to a new chapter of friendship and co-parenting and grandparenting. This decision was made with deep respect and care for one another. While change brings its own emotions, we are moving forward with appreciation for the life we've built together and the love that will always remain. Our commitment to our family remains strong, and we will continue to support each other with love and encouragement and community as we navigate this transition with grace and integrity. Love evolves, and we embrace this change with open hearts. Thank you for holding space for us during this time. Okay, so that was the announcement. A lot of people are shocked. A lot of people like myself are actually not surprised, because I was looking at the rhetoric she was teaching, which is, and you can look back at my video breakdown of the courses she sells. My assessment of her marriage course is basically how to help your husband not be a misogynist. I was like, how can you treat your husband like he's a misogynist pig and live a happy marriage? Like, how can that be your vibe in your relationship? And it turns out that you can't have it that way. And she is an expression of those ideas. Her life is an expression of those ideas. When you look at Valerie Hamaker, her and her husband it's mostly her run a podcast, which has really advocated for people leaving the church. And I have an actual video that I break down at Word Radio, where she actually says, like, you should step away from the church. Like, you should leave if you don't like it. She has long since advocated for this very, like, ideas that you would say, how can you stay a member and still advocate for these things? And turns out you cannot have it all, even though that's what these women have been selling for 10 years. Once again, these are products these women are selling. So here we have the OG feminists. What happens long term with these OG feminists? You have Kate Kelly, divorced, 2 kids, single, and also not a member of the church, even though she was, you can go through a repentance process after being excommunicated. Like, you can try and reclaim your membership. That does happen. You have Julie Hanks, well-known LDS therapist, marriage counselor, who announces after 36 years she's getting a divorce. And then you have Valerie Hamaker, who has for years advocated for this, like, you can walk as close to the edge of the cliff as you want kind of Mormonism. And you find out that it didn't even take a disciplinary council for her to rescind her membership. Like, she just left, like, I think that they are doing a good enough job of debunking their own arguments and their own kind of feministy approach to Mormonism that we don't really need to comment on it a ton. So this is something that my good friend Jacob Hansen with Thoughtful Faith posted that I wanted to highlight for you, that I'm going to, I grew up in New England, which is the heart of feminism. So I've often thought what my life would be like if it weren't for the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, uniquely encouraging young women and women to embrace motherhood, embrace marriage, have a core value of family life, and men as well. But in New England growing up, there were so many forces telling you to not value that. There is a recent research study that found that the two states with the highest number of atheists are Vermont and New Hampshire, which is where I grew up. And I was like, if I hadn't had the gospel in my life growing up, I would 100% not believe in God. Or, I mean, obviously I wouldn't believe in God. I wouldn't believe in family. I wouldn't have gotten married. And so what you're seeing is the way that LDS feminists and feminism in the LDS church is actually impacting the rate at which LDS women are staying a member of the church. Okay. This is by Christopher Charrington, and this is conducted from Pew Research data on their religious landscape study. And it basically shows that 2007, there's way more, looks like there's a lot more women than men. Well, there's a significant number of more women than men in the church. 2014, that gap lessens. And then in 2023, 2024, we have found that there are now there are actually more men than women in the church, which means that women are leaving traditionalism. They're leaving this embrace of a core value of family life. And this is why we have to start pushing back on this advocacy by women who say you can have it all. These women who say you can reject traditionalism. And I actually refer to women like Julie Hanks and Valerie Hamaker as late in life feminists, because they are women who have they have invested their early life in traditionalism. They get the kids, they get the marriage, and then they decide to turn their backs on it and suddenly become poster children for worldly empowerment. And they think it's not going to cost them anything. And they're telling younger women, like, you should prioritize your career. That should be the number one thing that you do. And marriage is oppressive, and don't listen to the men in the church because that would be oppressive. So what's interesting and why it's valuable to assess these women is because the same exact narratives, feministy narratives that they're arguing for, are going to be recycled by this new up-and-coming generation of LDS-ish feminists. They're actually more ex-Mormon feminists, but they're going to be speaking to an LDS audience. And if you don't want this graph that I just showed you to continue to look more aggressive, we have to start proactively teaching this core value to our young women of valuing like family life. And the best way to do that is in your own home and simply testifying and saying how happy it makes you. And Elyssa Grenfell is someone I will definitely be doing some, videos on and debunking. She was a former LDS missionary, grew up in the church. We've done a lot of breakdowns on her book, How to Leave the Mormon Church, on Word Radio Women. You can see, I love this. Like, this is the same argument that Julie Hanks was making for like 10 years. Is the LDS church bad for women, right? This is the same argument, right? Modesty is oppressive. That was a big thing that Julie Hanks and Valerie Hamaker was saying, was that modesty, encouragement, or garment wearing for LDS women is oppressive. That's exactly what Elyssa Grenfell is saying, right? And it's the same exact arguments. That's why it's important to pay attention to the way that these ideas express themselves over time. I said to my parents once that it's so interesting growing up in Vermont, in the same Vermont, and technically more was in New Hampshire, but growing up in the same exact community for 20 plus years, I was able to see how people's choices over time made a difference in people's families and what things looked like over the course of 25 years. And what happens is that, the reason I used the Sex and the City Candace Bushnell example at the beginning is that you're only paying attention to these ideas when they're flashy and young and amazing. No one wants to see what those ideas look like in 30 years, right? So in the 90s, Candace Bushnell and Sex and the City is advocating for child-free life, sexual promiscuity, like all these amazing freedoms. Like, who wouldn't want that in their 20s? You know what I mean? Like, okay. But then in her 60s, she's saying, I regret not having children. I am now truly alone. She regrets those choices. And what I think is sad is that girls and young women don't have as much time to prioritize family life. We really only have like our 20s to really decide that marriage and family is something we really want, maybe into your early 30s, right? Have you ever talked to someone who's trying to get pregnant in their mid 30s? They will all, or having IVF, they will all tell you, I wish I started sooner. I wish someone had told me to prioritize my family sooner. These girls are the new crop of LDS feminists, and they are 100% influencing the girls who are up and coming in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and telling them that the religion is inherently sexist. And she's been featured on, a lot of ex-Mormon things, but she's still speaking. Former Mormon missionary stops believing, and she basically talks you through how oppressive the church is and how bad it is for women. The next girl who's really making a big impact she's like a girls camp podcast, and she's on social media. And she is interesting because she's a lot less substantive in her arguments. And the basic gist with this girl, Haley, is to just kind of make fun of Mormonism and make it seem super uncool. Now, one of the things that you have to have, the formula you have to have, is that you have to be pretty and you have to be wealthy looking. And you have to basically sell this argument that you can have everything you want and there's no cost, right? And I literally, if you want a prediction of mine, there is no way that Elyssa Grenfell stays with her husband. Like, are you kidding me? I've said this to the women in Ward Radio, and they're like, Rachel, that is so harsh. I'm like, no way. No way that this girl, Elyssa Grenfell, who's very pretty and is now a multi-millionaire off this grift of being anti-Mormon, that's her husband. There is no way that she stays with this guy. 100%, I will bet money on it. In the next 5 years, this girl gets a divorce and finds herself after leaving her marriage that's oppressive, right? So it just shows you that, if you're going to embrace this idea that religion is sexist, that marriage is sexist, do not be surprised if you find out down the road that you've lost your faith and you've lost your marriage. And then they repackage it just how I predict Julie Hanks is going to repackage it. You think Julie Hanks's grift is over? It's not over. It is not over. This lady, Julie Hanks's grift, is not over. I guarantee you, she is going to start selling courses on how to be happy as a single woman, how leaving my marriage was so empowering. So that's the next sales pitch, is that divorce is a truly empowering act. And please don't misunderstand me. I have a sister who's divorced. I have good friends who've gone through divorces. And I have so much respect for people whose lives haven't gone the way that they planned, who stay true to their covenants, stay active and contributive members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I have so much respect for those people because I can't imagine something harder. I cannot imagine how hard that would be. And I have so much respect. But the difference is that most of those people are not selling divorce as a empowering lifestyle choice. Whereas that is exactly what Julie Hanks is going to do next with her little rebrand. Okay, so you've got Haley with Girls Camp Podcast. So she's young, she's wealthy, she's hip, and her thing is the church is sexist. LDS garments are oppressive. How it's super empowering to be single and not have kids and all the freedom, and aren't Mormons so weird? So that's going to be an interesting one because it's a new transition in LDS feminism, which is, it's less substantive. One of the things I've noticed with men will leave the church based on facts and history of the church. Women will leave the church because of feelings. That's why Elyssa Grenfell and this new era of, and Rosie Card, I actually would also put in that category. She's kind of fallen off a little bit, but you can see she's always highlighting, she's on Instagram And she's always highlighting how the church institution is sexist towards women. And she's a big leader in praying to Heavenly Mother. She had like I think you could actually argue that Elder Renlund's talk that really clarified our doctrine on Heavenly Mother, but also said like we don't pray to her. That's not in our doctrine. She's probably like her advocacy for praying to Heavenly Mother or selfless is probably the reason for that. So this is a Salt Lake Tribune article. Like they love her. Voices in 20 LDS women may see another half inch of progress. Exclusions apply. Right. So it's just this narrative of, oh my gosh, the LDS Church is so sexist towards women. That's why women like me, who are busy with our kids but have advanced degrees and have worked and have careers, need to start pushing back on this and say like, look, you may have an experience and a grift that you feel good about, but the doctrine and the practice of this religion don't back up what you're saying at all. And we need to let girls know, like, these are not trusted sources. Like Rosie Card is trying to figure out where she stands. She's been kind of honest about like, she doesn't want to be an ex-Mormon, but she doesn't want to be a Mormon. She just wants to be herself. But she's always highlighting how oppressive the church is. When there's women like me and every woman on Word Radio who speak out, who that just has not been our experience. And also the doctrine doesn't say that. Like the one of the things I'm always highlighting on this channel is there's no other religion in the world that believes in a physical, real, divine heavenly mother, like a female super god. Like we believe in this doctrine. I feel like, and I don't know if it's accurate to say that we are a female empowering church, because that just falls into the gender baiting trap, which is like we aren't pro women or pro men. We're pro family. We believe in men and women working together. And it just doesn't serve anyone when you have men and women fighting each other. That's when you get divorce. That's when you get men and women resenting each other. That's when you get incredibly low dating and marriage rates. And I just think it's really important to highlight the rise and fall of these LDS feminists, because Elyssa Grenfell and Rosie Card and Haley, what's her name from Girls Camp Podcast, they're all young right now, right? We can't see how these toxic feminist ideas are going to impact their lives for the next 20, 30 years. But there are girls who are going to listen to them. So it's important to highlight Julie Hanks, Valerie Hamaker, Kate Kelly, they influenced women 30 years ago. Would people have listened to them 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, had they known that Julie Hanks would eventually just kind of lie about the nightmare behind the scenes of her marriage falling apart and still sell courses? Would people have bought into Valerie Hamaker's take on living a lifestyle in the gospel had they known that she'd eventually just by choice leave the church? Like, there's no such thing as a forced self-resignation. Like, nobody forced you. You and your husband just did that. And I would venture to guess that she and her husband, I mean, I don't know much about her and her spouse. I don't know much, and I couldn't know, but and I just think it's a tough thing to advocate and be so anti something and have harmony in your home and harmony in your marriage. That's just a side note. So that's the reason why I think it is important to highlight the fall of LDS feminists from the last 20 years, so that when we start pushing back on, the Rosie Cards and the Haley Girls Camp podcasts and Elyssa Grenfells of the world, that we let our young women know, like, this bill of goods that they're selling you isn't true. Like, why would a religion that wants to oppress women celebrate and promote their belief in a physical, divine, heavenly mother? Like, why would we do that? Why would we subsidize like 70% of every girl who goes to all these BYUs? We have 3 main BYU campuses, and then you have LDS Business College. Like, we subsidize female education to the tune of 70%, and there are more women who are accepted to LDS universities than men. So if the LDS Church is oppressive, they're doing a really bad job, because all they're doing is educating women and promoting this reality of a divine heavenly mother. So we have to push back on this. It's why it's important. Unless you want this next, unless you want LDS participation in the church to continue to look like this graph, LDS women need to really showcase how it's okay to be a woman of faith and a woman who is married with children, and be educated and be articulate and also have faith in Jesus Christ. Like, it's okay to do that. Like, you don't have to be like a man-hating feminist to like be empowered, or to be like your own sovereign person. And I would just, we need to be skeptical. We need to show our girls to be skeptical of these women. Thanks for sticking with me on this. If you found this valuable, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. I'm so grateful for so many of you who have left some really amazing comments, leaving your personal stories, your testimonies, sharing your experiences. You can find me on X as well. I tend to be a little more controversial over there. And I'm also on Word Radio. If you found this valuable, please like and subscribe, and share it with a friend. Share it with someone that this might be helpful to. Maybe I articulate messages that you don't necessarily want to have to say. I'm willing to say what's true. All right. So thanks for being with me here, you guys. Bye.
The restoration of the priesthood is just as relevant to you as a woman